1. It's about family, but not the kind that brings you soup when you're sick. It's about the kind that smiles to your face while they pull the rug out from under you. And it gets messy, fast. So, settle in. My wealthy grandmother, Evelyn Hart, saw me and my 6-year-old daughter, Leia, standing outside a family shelter at 6:15 in the morning. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was. She rolled down the window of her black sedan, looked me dead in the eye, and asked, "Maya, why aren't you living in your house on Hawthorne Street?" I was stunned. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. I stared at her and whispered, "What house?" 3 days later, I arrived at a family event, and my parents went pale. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that moment was so satisfying, you have to understand the hell we were living in before that car pulled up. If you've never tried to get a 6-year-old ready for school while living in a family shelter, I can summarize the experience for you. It is like running a small, chaotic airport, except the passengers are highly emotional, the security line is made of pure shame, and you are trying to do it all while missing a shoe. That particular morning, it wasn't a shoe. It was a sock. We were in the communal bathroom. The fluorescent lights were humming that angry, buzzing sound they make when they're about to burn out. The air smelled like industrial bleach and something stale, like microwaved food that had been left out too long. Leia was sitting on the closed lid of the toilet, clutching one pink sock with a unicorn on it. Her bare foot was swinging back and forth, hitting the porcelain with a dull thud. "Mom," she whispered. She used her small voice, the one she'd developed over the last few months. It was the voice of a kid trying desperately not to be a burden. "It's okay. I can wear different socks. It's a style." She held up the pink unicorn sock in one hand and a white athletic sock in the other. The white one was dingy, stained gray from the laundromat washers that never really got things clean. I stared at those socks like they were evidence at a crime scene. I felt tears pricking the back of my eyes, hot and sharp. It wasn't about the socks. It's never about the socks. It was about the fact that I couldn't even give my daughter a matching pair to wear to first grade. "It's a bold fashion choice," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Very avant-garde. I do what I want. That's the vibe, right?" Leia smiled, a real one this time. "Yeah. I do what I want." And just like that, for half a second, I forgot where we were. I forgot the intake forms, the curfew, the way the staff looked at you with that exhausted pity. Then, the shelter door banged open down the hall, and the cold draft slapped me back into reality. We hurried out. We had to. If you miss the bus, you're late. If you're late, you lose your spot in line for the shower tonight. Everything was a calculation. We stepped outside St. Bridget's family shelter. It was 6:12 a.m. The sky was a bruised, ugly gray, hanging low over the city. The sidewalk was damp, and the air had that biting winter smell, metallic and clean, like the world had been scrubbed too hard with steel wool. Leia adjusted her backpack. It looked massive on her, like a turtle shell threatening to tip her over. I knelt down and tugged the zipper up on her puffy coat, right to her chin. I tried not to look at the sign above the entrance. St. Bridget's Family Shelter. It wasn't even the word shelter that gutted me every morning. It was the word family. It felt like an accusation. Like we were a specific category of failure. We weren't just poor, we were a broken unit. A label on a government box. "Okay," I said, forcing brightness into my voice that I didn't feel. "School bus in 5 minutes. You got your homework?" Leia nodded. She was brave in a quiet way that made me feel both bursting with pride and sick with guilt at the same time. She looked at her mismatched feet, then up at me. "Mom?" she asked softly. "Yeah, baby? Do I still have to say my address when Mrs. Cole asks?" My stomach clenched into a hard knot. It was the first week of a new unit at school. They were learning about their neighborhood. "I don't think she'll ask today," I lied. "But if she does, just use Grandma and Grandpa's old address for now, okay?" Just until we get settled. Leia didn't push. She just looked down at her shoes, then back up at me like she was memorizing my face. Like she was checking if I was still me, or if the stress had finally turned me into someone else. "Mom," she said, her voice wobbling just a little. "Are we going to move again?" I opened my mouth to promise her something, anything, but nothing came out. I couldn't lie to her again. Not about this. And that is exactly when the universe decided to intervene. A black sedan slid to the curb like it owned the pavement. It moved silently, sleek and polished, reflecting the gray sky on its hood. It wasn't a taxi. It wasn't an Uber. It wasn't the kind of car that ever pulled up to St. Bridget's unless the driver had taken a massive wrong turn and was currently locking their doors in panic. The back window rolled down. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was wearing a tailored wool coat the color of midnight, leather gloves, and boots that probably cost more than my car. Evelyn Hart. My grandmother. I hadn't seen her in over a year. I knew that because my life was measured in 2 eras, before everything fell apart and after. She belonged firmly in the before. She looked exactly the way she always did. Composed. Elegant. Slightly terrifying. Not in a cruel way, but in a way that said she once ended a boardroom argument by simply raising one eyebrow. She was a woman who didn't deal with problems, she eliminated them. Her gaze landed on me first. I saw recognition, then confusion. Then her eyes slid down to Leia. Something changed in her face. It was quick and sharp, like a crack appearing in a pane of glass. She looked up at the peeling sign above the entrance, "Family Shelter," and then she looked back at me. "Maya," she said. My name sounded strange in her voice, heavy, like she hadn't said it out loud in a long time. "What are you doing here?" My first instinct was to lie. Not because I thought she'd judge me, Evelyn wasn't judgmental, she was practical, but because I couldn't stand being seen. I couldn't stand the pity. "I'm fine," I said, the automatic reflex of exhausted women everywhere. "We're okay. It's just temporary." Evelyn's eyes flicked down to Leia's mismatched socks. Then to my hands, which were red, chapped, and dry from too much cheap sanitizer and too much cold air. Her voice went quieter, dropping an octave. "Maya," she said again, stepping closer. She ignored the puddle on the sidewalk. "Why aren't you living in your house on Hawthorne Street?" The world tilted on its axis. I blinked at her. "My, what?" She didn't repeat herself like she thought I was deaf. She repeated herself like she thought I might faint, and she wanted to anchor me to the ground. "The house," she said, enunciating every word. "On Hawthorne Street." My heart started pounding so hard I could feel the pulse in my throat. I felt dizzy. "What house?" I heard myself say. My voice sounded thin, like it was coming from a mile away. "Grandma, I don't have a house. I don't have anything." Evelyn stared at me. For a long moment, nobody moved. She was looking at me as if I'd spoken in another language. I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was running numbers, timelines, possibilities. She was looking for the variable that didn't fit. Leia tugged my sleeve. "Mom," she whispered. "Do we have a house?" I looked down at her. Her eyes were wide, hopeful in a way that physically hurt my chest. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "No, honey," I said gently. "We don't." Evelyn's face went very still. And when Evelyn Hart went still, it usually meant something was about to break. She stepped closer, not toward me, but toward Leia. She crouched down in front of her. This was shocking in itself. Evelyn Hart did not crouch. She sat in chairs that supported her posture, and the world adjusted to her level. But there she was, lowering herself to the dirty sidewalk, eye to eye with my 6-year-old. "You're Leia, right?" she asked. "Yes," Leia whispered shyly, hiding half behind my leg. Evelyn's expression softened. It was a look I hadn't seen on her face in 20 years. That's a beautiful name. Then her eyes lifted to mine. The softness vanished. The steel was back. Get in the car, she said. I blinked. Grandma. Get in the car, she repeated. There was no room in her tone for negotiation. It wasn't an offer. It was a command. I felt heat rush to my face. It was a tangled mess of anger, embarrassment, and relief. Evelyn opened the back door of the sedan. The interior looked like a spaceship, soft beige leather, climate control, safety. I hesitated. I looked at the shelter door. I looked at the bus stop where the yellow bus was just turning the corner. Leia looked up at me. Mom, she said, her voice small and steady. It's okay. And the fact that my 6-year-old was comforting me was the final straw. I nodded. Okay. Leia climbed into the back seat first, clutching her backpack like a shield. I slid in beside her. The door shut with a solid, heavy thud that sealed out the noise of the city. The silence inside felt expensive. It smelled like leather and faint vanilla. Evelyn didn't drive immediately. She just sat there in the driver's seat, both hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Her knuckles were white. Then she spoke. Very calmly. By tonight, she said, I will know who did this. My stomach flipped. Grandma, I don't understand. Did what? She turned her head to look at me over her shoulder. Her eyes were furious, but the rage wasn't directed at me. No, she said. You don't understand. And that tells me everything I need to know. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen once, and put it to her ear. Call Adam. A man answered quickly on the car's Bluetooth system. Miss Hart? Adam, this is Evelyn, she said. Her voice was ice cold. Get the property manager for Hawthorne Street on the line immediately. I want a simple answer to 3 questions. Who has the keys? Who is living there? And has anyone been collecting money on the lease? My blood ran cold. Money? Lease? I stared at her profile, at the set of her jaw. I realized I wasn't just embarrassed anymore. I was standing on the edge of something much darker than just bad luck. If you'd asked me 6 months earlier if I thought I'd ever be living in a shelter with my daughter, I would have laughed. Not because I thought I was better than that, but because I thought I had a safety net. I thought I had family. That's a dangerous kind of arrogance, by the way. Thinking it can't happen to me. It doesn't protect you. It just makes the fall hurt so much more when you hit the bottom. 6 months earlier, I was still working as a nursing assistant at St. Jude's Medical Center. 12-hour shifts, call lights going off like a slot machine in a casino, people asking me for things I didn't have to give, time, answers, miracles. I was exhausted, sure. My feet were permanently swollen, and I smelled like antiseptic wipes, but I was surviving. And then, my lease ended, the rent hiked up by 40%, and I made the mistake of moving in with my parents. It was supposed to be temporary. It always starts with temporary. My dad, Robert, had that calm, reasonable voice that people instinctively believe. He was the guy neighbors waved to. My mom, Diane, had that soft, maternal smile that made her sound like she was doing you a massive favor, even when she was cutting you off at the knees. You can stay with us until you get back on your feet, Diane had said, pouring tea in her spotless kitchen. Leia needs stability. Family supports family. I should have heard the fine print hiding in that sentence. But I didn't. I heard relief. At first, it was tolerable. My parents' apartment was small, but we made it work. Leia slept in my old room, I took the pull-out couch. I worked double shifts. I paid what I could for groceries. I kept my head down. Then the comments started. Not big, obvious attacks, my parents were too polite for that. These were little ones. The kind that don't look like cruelty if you try to explain them to someone else later. "You're always tired," Diane would say, stepping over my work shoes. "Maybe you should organize your life better." Robert would sigh loudly when Leia's toys were on the rug. "We're just trying to keep the place nice, Maya. Is that too much to ask?" And then one night, after I'd come home from a double shift with my brain half dead and my soul scraped thin, Diane sat down at the kitchen table. She had her hands folded. She looked like she was about to deliver a terminal diagnosis. "We need to talk," she said. I already knew that tone. It was the tone of a door closing. "We think it's time you became independent," she said softly. "You've been here long enough." "I'm trying, Mom," I said, keeping my voice even. "Rents are insane right now. The deposits alone are $3,000. I just need a little more time." "You're a mother," Diane said, staring at a spot on the tablecloth. "If you're a good mother, you'll figure it out." The words hit me so hard I actually looked around the room, thinking someone else must have said them. Robert cleared his throat from the living room. 30 days. That's reasonable. We're not monsters." I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. But screaming never helped in that apartment. It just gave them something to point at later, evidence of my instability. So, I nodded. "Okay." And I tried. God, I tried. I looked at listings during my 10-minute breaks at the hospital, my thumbs scrolling frantically while I gulped lukewarm cafeteria coffee. I called places. I begged. I got told the same thing over and over, first and last month. Security deposit. Proof of income 3 times the rent. Credit check. Sorry, we chose another applicant. Every day felt like I was running uphill in mud with Leia on my back. And then came the night they decided 30 days was actually just a suggestion. It was after a late shift. I'd helped a confused elderly man back into bed 3 times, cleaned up a spilled meal tray, and held a woman's hand while she cried because she was terrified of her surgery in the morning. I was running on fumes. I came home after midnight. The hallway light outside my parents' apartment was buzzing. My stomach tightened immediately. 2 cardboard boxes sat outside the door. My boxes. I stared at them for a long second, my brain refusing to accept the shape of what I was seeing. It looked like a mistake. It looked like trash day. Then I tried the doorknob. Locked. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, harder. "Mom? Dad?" Finally, the door cracked open. The chain was still on. Diane's face appeared in the gap, calm and composed, as if this was a normal Tuesday interaction. "You need to keep your voice down," she whispered sharply. "The neighbors. Why are my things outside?" I demanded, my voice trembling. Robert's voice drifted from behind her, sounding bored. "We told you, Maya. Independence." "It hasn't been 30 days, I said. It's been 12. Diane's expression hardened just slightly. "Plans change." I glanced past her shoulder into the entryway. My heart stopped. Leia was curled up on the floor right by the shoe rack. Her little pink jacket was folded under her head like a pillow. She was half asleep, her shoes still on. They had staged her there. They had put her by the door so I could scoop her up and disappear without waking the rest of the apartment. "Where are we supposed to go?" I hissed, panic rising in my throat like bile. "It's midnight." Diane's smile came back, thin and satisfied. "You'll figure it out. You always do." And then, as if she were giving me a helpful tip, she added, "Don't make a scene." The door clicked shut. The deadbolt slid home. I stood there in the hallway, the silence buzzing in my ears. I didn't bang on the door. I didn't scream. I just felt cold. I stepped inside just long enough to crouch down and slide my arms under Leia. She made a tiny, sleepy sound and automatically wrapped her arms around my neck. As I backed out into the hall, I saw the peephole darken. Diane was watching. Leia stirred as the cold hallway air hit her face. "Mom," she mumbled into my shoulder. "It's okay," I lied automatically. We're having a sleepover." I shoved the boxes into my car and drove. I don't remember most of that night. I remember streetlights blurring into streaks. I remember the way my hands shook on the steering wheel so bad I had to grip it until my fingers hurt. I remember parking in a Walmart lot because the lights were bright and there were security cameras. I climbed into the back seat with Leia. She was curled like a question mark. I pulled a blanket over us. I remember thinking, over and over, how did this happen? The next day, I tried to fix it. Because that's what I do. I fix things. I wipe down messes. I lift people who can't lift themselves. I called Diane. She didn't answer. I called Robert. He answered once. "We're doing this because we love you," he said, sounding like he was reading from a bad self-help book. "Tough love, Maya. You need to learn." Then he hung up. I went to work anyway because the rent I didn't have wasn't going to pay itself. By day 3, my cheeks were hollow from stress, and my stomach hurt from cheap gas station food. We stayed in a motel for 2 nights. Then the money ran out. A school counselor noticed Leia was quiet. She asked if everything was okay. I lied. Then she asked again, gently, and I saw Leia watching me with those big, terrified eyes, learning from me how to lie to survive. That broke me. So I told the truth. 2 days later, I was filling out shelter intake forms while Leia sat beside me, swinging her legs. The intake worker was kind but tired. "We need to know where you stayed last night," she said. "In my car," I whispered. She nodded like she was checking a box for milk or eggs. Leia leaned toward me and whispered, too loudly, "Is this our house now?" The woman flinched. I smiled too hard. "No," I said quickly. "No, sweetheart. This is, just for now." I wanted to say temporary, but the word tasted like ash in my mouth. That night, lying on a narrow cot in a room that smelled like bleach and strangers, I thought about calling my grandmother. Evelyn Hart. But you have to understand, Evelyn wasn't the kind of woman you called to cry. She was the kind of woman you called when you had a strategy. And my mother had spent 20 years training me not to bother her. "Your grandmother hates drama," Diane always said. "She doesn't like weakness. Don't embarrass yourself." When I'd texted Diane after the lockout asking if Evelyn knew what was happening, Diane responded instantly, "Grandma is overseas. She's busy. Don't drag her into this." So I didn't call. I told myself I'd handle it. I told myself I didn't want to look pathetic. And then, the black sedan showed up. Back in the car, the silence was heavy. Evelyn's call to the property manager had ended before I could hear the answers, but the look on her face was enough. She looked like a general who had just discovered treason in the ranks. "Send the full file to my lawyer," she had said to Adam. "Everything." She looked at me, not with pity, but with certainty. "I sent one text to Leia's school," she said. "Family emergency. She won't be in today." Evelyn drove us to a diner about 10 minutes away. It was one of those old-school places with warm, steamy windows, a bell on the door, and menus that smelled like maple syrup and coffee. Inside, the heater blasted my face so hard I almost cried from the sheer shock of being warm. We slid into a red vinyl booth. Leia immediately found the kids' menu and started coloring a cartoon pancake like it was the most important job in the world. Evelyn ordered hot chocolate for Leia without asking. Big, towering whipped cream, sprinkles, the works. I watched her do it and felt a weird wave of anger, not at Evelyn, but at the universe. It was that easy to be kind. It cost $5 and 0 effort. And my parents had chosen everything else. Evelyn lifted her phone again. "Grandma," I started, then stopped. My hands were shaking. "What house? Why are you here? How did you find us?" Evelyn didn't answer my questions in the order my panic wanted. She just said calmly, "I'm going to make another call. You will listen. And you will not interrupt." I nodded. It was the kind of nod you give a surgeon before you go under. She tapped the screen and put the phone on speaker, laying it flat on the sticky table between us. 1 ring. 2. Then my mother's voice filled the booth. "Diane Hart Collins speaking." She sounded bright, sweet, like she was auditioning for the role of loving parent in a community theater production. "Diane," Evelyn said. Her tone was pleasant. Almost gentle. "It's Evelyn." "Oh my goodness, what a surprise. How are you?" "I was just thinking about Maya," Evelyn said, stirring her tea. "How is she doing?" I felt my stomach drop into my shoes. I stopped breathing. There was a microsecond of silence on the line. The tiniest pause where a liar decides which version of reality is most useful. Then Diane answered smoothly, confidently, like she'd been practicing the sentence in the mirror every morning. "Oh, she's doing great," Diane chirped. "She's living in the house. She's settled in beautifully. She loves it. You know Maya, she wanted some space, so we didn't want to bother you with updates." I stared at the phone. My vision blurred. Across from me, Leia colored quietly, humming to herself. She didn't understand the words, but she understood tone. She glanced up once, saw my face, and went right back to coloring harder, scribbling fiercely as if she could erase the tension in the air. Diane kept talking, filling the silence with cheerful nonsense, how busy she'd been, how proud she was, how family is everything. Evelyn let her talk. She didn't interrupt. She didn't rush her. She just sat there, sipping her tea, giving my mother enough rope to hang herself properly. Finally, Diane paused for breath. "That's good to hear," Evelyn said. Her voice was flat. And then she ended the call. Just like that. No confrontation. No screaming. No gotcha. My throat tightened. That silence was louder than any scream. "She knew," I whispered. I let out a laugh that sounded like a cough. "She lied so easily. She knew the whole time." Evelyn's eyes stayed on mine, steady and sharp as a diamond cutter. "She knew enough to lie without thinking," she said. "That tells me exactly what I need to know." Leia slid her coloring page toward me. "Mom, look." I made the pancake purple. I forced a smile so quickly it probably looked painful. "Wow," I said. "That is a very brave pancake." Leia giggled. Then Evelyn leaned in, lowered her voice so Leia wouldn't hear, and said the simple sentence that rearranged my entire life. "I arranged a house for you," she said. "On Hawthorne Street. 6 months ago. Your parents were supposed to manage the handoff, keys, move-in, utilities, all of it. They told me it was done." My brain tried to process it. A house. For us. My parents had been watching me drown, watching me sell my things, watching me sleep in a car with their granddaughter, while they held the keys to a house meant for me. I gripped the edge of the booth until my knuckles turned white. "Why wouldn't you tell me directly?" I asked. I felt stupid immediately, blaming the only person who had shown up. Evelyn didn't flinch. "Because I trusted your parents," she said simply. "Which was my mistake. Not yours." She stood up. "Stay here. Eat." She walked a few steps away, near the entrance of the diner, and made 2 quick calls. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the posture. Low voice, clipped gestures. Efficient. When she came back, she didn't sit down like she planned to linger. She sat down like she planned to move. "You're not going back to that shelter," she said. My pride tried to stand up and argue. "I can handle this, I don't need charity." But my exhaustion shoved my pride back down and sat on it. "Okay," I whispered. It was the most honest word I'd said all day. "Good," Evelyn said. Because tonight, your parents are hosting an event. A family dinner at the Grand Hotel. My stomach tightened. When? Evelyn's gaze stayed on the city lights outside the window. Tonight, she said. And we'll be there. She didn't say it like a threat. She said it like a verdict. We didn't go to the dinner that night. Evelyn, in her infinite wisdom, knew that I needed to stop looking like a shelter resident before I faced the people who put me there. She checked us into a hotel, a nice one, with crisp sheets and a bathroom bigger than my parents' kitchen. Leia bounced on the bed like it was a trampoline, squealing with joy. She found the little complimentary soap, sniffed it dramatically, and announced, "Mom, this smells like a rich lady." I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed without forcing it in months. 3 days later, I stood in the hotel bathroom staring at myself in the mirror. I looked like a version of me that had been put through a heavy-duty wash cycle and finally hung up to dry in the sun. Evelyn had insisted I buy a dress. Not a flashy one, just a clean, simple navy dress that fit perfectly. "You don't need armor, Maya," she'd told me, handing me her credit card with a look that dared me to argue. "You need dignity." I wasn't sure dignity came in polyester blends, but looking in the mirror, I saw what she meant. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a woman who was done. On the ride to the venue, my stomach twisted so hard I thought I might actually throw up in Evelyn's pristine leather interior. "What if I freeze?" I asked quietly, staring at my hands. Evelyn didn't look away from the road. "Then I'll speak." "What if they deny everything?" "They will," Evelyn said calmly. "Liars always do." "What if everyone thinks I stopped?" I didn't even have a word for what I was afraid of. Ungrateful? Crazy? Evelyn glanced at me then, her gaze sharp but steady. "Maya," she said. "You have survived sleeping in a parking lot in December. You have survived a system designed to break you. You can survive a room full of people eating catered hors d'oeuvres." The car pulled up outside the venue. It was one of those hotel event spaces with soft, flattering lighting and hard, fake smiles. A sign by the entrance read, "Hart Collins Family Dinner." Of course it did. My mother loved an event. She didn't like people, but she loved an audience. Inside, the room was buzzing. Relatives I hadn't seen in months, aunts, uncles, cousins, were mingling, holding wine glasses and small plates of food. It was the kind of gathering where everyone pretends the most important thing in the world is the seating arrangement. Before we went in, Evelyn stopped at a side door and spoke briefly to a staff member. A woman nodded and opened a small, private room next to the banquet hall. It was quiet, stocked with water bottles and a plate of cookies. "This is for Leia," Evelyn said. "She doesn't need to be in the crossfire." Leia took one cautious step into the room, then looked up at Evelyn seriously. "Do I get all the cookies?" "Yes," Evelyn said, dead serious. "Every single one." Leia accepted that deal immediately. A trusted assistant stayed with her, and Leia waved at me, completely unaware she was being protected from a family apocalypse. Then Evelyn looked at me. "You go in first," she said. I knew what she was doing. She wanted them to see me before they saw her. She wanted them to panic in silence. I walked into the banquet room alone. The chatter softened, then resumed, the way people do when they sense tension but don't want to be the first to acknowledge it. Then, Diane saw me. Her smile appeared automatically, a reflex, and then it glitched. Her eyes flicked over my dress, my posture, the fact that I wasn't wearing my desperation on my face anymore. Her hands tightened around her wine glass. Robert noticed a second later. His loud laugh died halfway through. His jaw clenched like he was biting down on a piece of glass. Neither of them moved toward me. They didn't ask where I'd been. They didn't ask how Leia was. They did what guilty people do when they're trying to calculate the danger level. They smiled tightly and waited. I stood near the edge of the room and let the silence do the work. A minute later, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Evelyn Hart entered. She walked in calm, unhurried, completely in control. Beside her was a man I didn't know, someone with a slim leather folder and a laptop bag. He looked like the kind of person who charged by the minute and never lost. Diane went pale. Not oh, what a surprise pale. More like, I just realized my entire life is a house of cards pale. Robert straightened his shoulders, puffing his chest out, trying to look authoritative. Evelyn nodded to a few relatives like she was simply attending a Tuesday brunch. Then she walked straight to the front of the room, near the microphone my mother had set up for her toast. Diane, Evelyn said, her voice carrying without her even raising it. Before we eat, I'd like to clear up a small confusion.